I was at the labor relations school at Cornell. Labor relations school sort of was divided among those people who were wanting to become lawyers and wanting to work for big business, basically, as labor relations lawyers. And then there was a group of us who were really interested in the labor movement and learning the lessons of the labor movement and trying to understand it. And today, the president of Cornell gave the State of the University address at a place called Bailey Hall, which is a big hall on campus. And I flashed back. I remember that I had been there in 1962 at Bailey Hall with none other than Jimmy Hoffa speaking, the president of the Teamsters Union, and he had come at the invitation of the ILR school. We actually had a dinner with him, and at this time, he was considered, totally mobbed up. He was the mafia. Bobby Kennedy had exposed him and written a whole book about, the Teamsters Union, denouncing them. And so when Jimmy Hoffa comes to Bailey Hall, the place is packed with fraternity boys all carrying copies of Bobby Kennedy's book about, they're gonna humiliate this guy, and Hoffa gets up there, and Hoffa gives a history of the trucking industry in America. He gives a history: who owns it, who controls it, how much ordinary Teamsters get paid, what they got paid before they had a union, what they're getting paid now, how they pushed for a health and welfare plan for workers, how they increased the wages of truck drivers in these long hauls across America who are getting paid terribly. And at the end, basically shuts everyone up because none of them really understood any of this. They had a couple of message points, coming out of Bobby Kennedy's book. You're connected to the mob and this and that. They had a few, points. And in a way, it's very classic to the way we debate today. If you watch Fox News, for example, what people don't realize is in the morning, every morning, the executives there circulate what they call the message points of the day. And every show on Fox News reiterates those message points. Bo Bergdahl, the soldier, he's a hero. He's in captivity. The Obama administration is too weak to save him. Now, a week later, the Obama administration saves him. New message points. He's a traitor. He's a deserter. We shouldn't have, rescued him. Other people died trying to rescue him. All this other stuff. And they just take a point and they just, kind of repeat it and repeat it and repeat it until that's the only thing people know about the issue. If you ask them about it, they will tell you what they've heard. They'll regurgitate what they've heard. They won't really be encouraged to think critically, to get other information, or to learn about anything. And this is one of the critical points about media. So at Cornell, I was doing this magazine to sort of challenge the absence of coverage of the struggles around the world. And that's what Dialogue Magazine was, and we did it, for the 4 years that I was there, and it actually went on for another 2 years after I left. I remember, we brought Malcolm X to debate at Cornell, and we published a transcript of the debate. And I get a call at the Dialogue office at the Cornell United Religious Work. Danny, there's a call for you. I said, well, who's calling? He said, Malcolm X is calling you. Malcolm X is calling me? You're kidding. So he gets on the phone. He says, Danny? I said, yeah. He says, thank you for sending me the magazine. We'd like to order a few copies at the mosque, here in Harlem. I said, how many copies do you want to order? He says, how about 400? I think our whole print run was like 600, of the magazine, 400. This is our biggest sale ever, 25 cents a piece, You do the math, this was like big money in those times. So he said, how can you send them to us? I said, well, no, Thanksgiving vacation is coming up. We'll bring them to you, So we went to the mosque. My co-editor and I in Harlem on 116th Street with these bundles of magazines from Cornell University, the Dialogue magazine, and we walked in and there was this wall of hostility. Who are these white boys at the mosque? mosque, and he said, well, we're here to see the minister, Minister Malcolm. He's expecting us. And, they looked at me like, well, you must be nuts, and they said, well, look, we'll check. So they called upstairs to his security guy, and the security guy came down. And the security guy had been with him at Cornell, so he remembered me. He said, oh, great, minister will be happy to receive you. He came down. We had coffee and bean pie, which the Muslims made. And it was like this amazing moment, of actually connecting, having coffee with Malcolm X after he had been at Cornell. And it was an incredible event. So, being as a journalist, we got to meet all these people, these activists who came and spoke at the university, some of them at our own invitation, who were part of the struggle for justice in America. One of them was James Baldwin, the great author and writer who came to Cornell and spoke, and James Farmer, the civil rights leader, and, various other people, Julian Bond, who was the head of SNCC at the time, and John Lewis, who's now a member of Congress, who was, the famous, was on the bridge in Selma, Alabama, and beaten that day. These are the, kind of our heroes. So, it was, I would say I learned more, not from school so much as from being in the environment with other students and people who are concerned about the world. And that's really what, I developed, my interests in becoming more active in changing the world because of that. And, also the foreign students. I became very much involved later in Africa. I made 6 films with Nelson Mandela. I've been in South Africa. I went there first in 1967. And, we dialogued stories about South Africa. We did stories about the Congo and what have you, and Patrice Lumumba. And, we were attempting to create more of a global spirit. And there were a lot of students from around the world who really appreciated that. They didn't feel like Americans, knew anything about their countries, much less about our own country, so it was a great learning experience. And I think that's what I remember most fondly about Cornell was, we learned in spite of the school. We learned in spite of the classes, although there were some extremely good professors who were critical of U.S. foreign policy, who taught us about the manifest destiny, about the wars of imperialism in the Philippines and in Spain and the Vietnams before Vietnam. And Cornell became a center of incredible research and scholarship about Vietnam and against the Vietnam War. So there was a lot in the university that was really very nurturing. And I learned a great deal there, and I learned to develop my skills as a journalist, as an editor, working, at Cornell. So this is the opportunity kids have today, is not just to get into robotically passing their exams, but actually exploring and learning. And, the problem is today, like when I went to the library at Cornell, okay, let's say I wanted to get a book, whatever it was. You would go to the stacks, which is where all the books were, and you would find out, like next to the book that you wanted to get, there was an interesting book that was related that you didn't even know about. And so you were able to take that book out too. So your knowledge base was increased. But today, we Google everything. We
follow the links, though. Yeah. That's the kind of a similar thing. We follow a link in a story that takes us to another story that opens our eyes about something else.
But I'm saying that the idea of libraries and the idea of learning on your own, self-actualized learning, whatever it is, was something that I developed at Cornell. And I really appreciated that opportunity, although I also found that a lot of the people there were very careerist. They were very, oriented, very patriotic. They weren't very critical. They had made it by coming to Cornell. It was a big kind of, place that created the elite. was one of the places that created the American elite. And so the dissenting views tend to get pushed to the side, except in a crisis. And there were a number of crises at Cornell, specifically the takeover of the Strait by, black students with arms, galvanized a tremendous debate and made the place a better place because of that debate. And one of the students who was there, I saw him today, Tom Jones, later became a member of the Board of Trustees of Cornell and the head of, this teacher pension, CREA, I don't know what it's called.
TIAA, CREF, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He became the head of that. He was a student activist at Cornell. So, Cornell has a history of people who contributed. Paul Robeson Jr. went there. There were many people who went there. And the spirit of the college, the land grant idea, was education for everyone. And I just heard the president today say that 50% of the students at Cornell are on various assistance from the school, and that they don't, the ability to pay is not in the criteria of selection. It's afterwards that they figure out about that. And as a result, he claims it has one of the most economically diverse student bodies in the country. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was interesting that he felt that's a good thing, to have an economically diverse student body.
Well, it would certainly be a good thing if we had free education through the PhD for everyone who wanted it, and then it would be equally economically better, more economically diverse. But you essentially are...
what's happening, though, today, and this is... subsequent to all this, I've made a lot of films. I did films on the financial crisis. I did a film called In Debt We Trust, which predicted the financial crisis, 2006, a year before Bear Stearns went down. And, one of the things I exposed was the subprime loans and the way in which people were in hock up to their, eyeballs, and that they were couldn't afford their lifestyles. They were, living on money that wasn't theirs. Now I've just learned that student debt in America has surpassed mortgage debt as the number one. So you have all these kids, they're going to be paying off these loans for the rest of their lives. I mean, this is a really frightening situation when you get out of college and suddenly, your life is supposed to be starting and you're saddled down with tremendous debts which make it impossible for you to explore things. You have to go to work right away to pay these loans back. So you can't take that trip to Europe. You can't get involved in a not-for-profit. You can't be a community organizer because you immediately have tremendous financial responsibilities, and sometimes, to your parents who have taken out loans on your behalf. So, we're in a situation that's becoming more and more like feudalism. Mm-hmm. Not even capitalism.
It's indentured servitude. I know people in their 50s who are still paying back their own student loans, who are paying back their children's student loans, or helping their children pay back their loans too.
So all of these things are connected in some ways.
But so, talking about your sort of self-taught journalism, because you studied labor relations, but you've been an independent journalist all these years, and supporting.
The thing I'm proud of is that in high school, I was on the high school newspaper, and I became the editor of the high school newspaper, and this is DeWitt Clinton High School, 4,200 horny boys when I went there. A high school that really probably produced half of the editorial board of the New York Times back in the 30s and 40s. I had a great journalism teacher who was very exacting and helped me learn about checking facts and about writing and all the rest of it. And that put me in, kind of inspired me to go on and become more of a journalist. And I worked at CNN, I worked at ABC News for 8 years, I worked at CNBC. I was a Nieman Fellow in journalism at Harvard, where I brought none other than I.F. Stone to speak to the to the students. He spoke about his writings on Socrates and what he was talking about at the time. But I also brought Allen Ginsberg and all these incredible people to speak at Harvard. So, coming out of this high school, coming out of this culture, of this labor culture in the Bronx, gave me a lot of questions to pursue, gave me a sense of values and the importance of social justice and all of this, which is what I've tried to serve in the rest of my life. And I've been very fortunate because I've been, I was there, as my mother said, she said, he tells it like it is because he was there when it was. Well, it still is, obviously, but, I was privileged to be part of this whole generation of change, and I'm still part of it. I'm still involved in it. I'm a blogger at newsdissector.net. I edit mediachannel.org, which is a network of journalism about the media, which people would find of interest. And I make films, and I've written several books. I wrote 2 books about the media coverage of the war in Iraq. So I've been very sensitized to these media issues. I think that media is one of the central challenges that we have, and so I didn't just become a journalist, for career reasons. I see journalism and I see media as a very political part of our culture, and for good and for bad.
And what do you see as the future of media now?
Well, I think we're in a very complicated and difficult time. First of all, the fact that we have access to all of this information at our fingertips, the online generation that's, very adept at using various technologies and websites and all the rest of it, is getting access to information, is also a junk food. Media becomes like junk food. You're going from one thing to the next very quickly, without context, without background, without some sort of historical perspective or analysis about how do you order these facts, what meaning do they have, how can that help you, how can that empower you to play more of a role, in a society in which you find yourself, and how can you connect with people in other cultures and other countries and learn from them. I mean, for me, in 1967, I went to South Africa as part of the resistance against apartheid, and through that experience, I met all of these activists who later became leaders of the liberation struggle that would triumph. Okay, and so a lot of times you take different paths, but if you pursue those paths and you ask deeper questions and you expose yourself to diverse experiences, I think you become more able to understand what's going on.
Congratulations on your 50th anniversary at Cornell University. Look forward to see what you're doing in the next 50 years, Danny. Thanks so much for being with us at WRFI.
Thank you, Ithaca College, for allowing us to do this interview here. And I think my experience is that there are a lot of people who are empty-minded. They don't know because they haven't been told, but they're open-minded. They're willing to learn. They're willing to get engaged in a process, and it's our job, if we do know, there's a saying in New York, if you see something, say something, okay? Well, I don't think it's just about terrorism and security and packages on subways. It's about everything. If you see something, say something.